I'm very pleased to be joined by former public advocate Mark Green, once again seeking to be elected New York City's public advocate. Welcome to CityWide.
Thank you very much, Ken.
So a question that I'm sure you've been asked half a dozen times a day since you tossed your hat in the ring. Why this position? Why now?
Well, I did this job, and so I know this job, I think, especially well. And I love public service. The city is in trouble. Mike Bloomberg is a substantial mayor who needs oversight and watching. I was very much against what he did on term limits. So to help the city out of this economic crisis to the extent the public advocate can, and to be a counterweight to a major mayor, I thought I'd offer myself back to the voters, so I am the former and maybe future public advocate.
You were a very aggressive foil to some of Mayor Giuliani's policies, particularly in the area of racial profiling, police misconduct, and the like. What policies of Mayor Bloomberg, if you were to be in office at the same time going forward, or policies of City Controller Bill Thompson, what policies do you take issue with that you think they need a counterweight?
Well, let me just step back for a second, Ken. You know the job extremely well because you served with me when I was there. One part of it is nothing to do with who the mayor is, in a sense. It's answering complaints from city taxpayers about city services. And boy, with the economy in the toilet, it's even more urgent that we have a public advocate who's very sensitive to individual concerns, seniors, children, municipal hospitals, people in need. Second is investigating city services, almost irrespective of who the mayor is, because he can't know everything in every agency. So if water bills are sprouting around the city because of a computer malfunction, which happened when I was public advocate, you blow the whistle. But last are the policies of a particular mayor. And as much as I don't always agree with Mike Bloomberg, but he's not Rudy Giuliani. His temperament is much more mellow and welcoming. So I think I would often work well with him when I agree with him on, for example, a lot of his health and environmental issues. But when he tried to jam the Jet Stadium into one of the most congested places in the country on the west side of Manhattan, which failed and now has left a underutilized Hudson Yards, I'll speak up. When he tried to overturn 2 voter referenda for 8-year term limits, you can have a debate whether it should be 8 or 12 years or not at all. But it was so grossly undemocratic and unfair that I spoke up about the first public person to condemn it the day he said, well, maybe I would. Some of his economic policies are not mine. He's a very skilled big business advocate. I am a consumer advocate for many decades. And so when he says, oh, I don't like more of the progressive income tax because people will leave the city because an income tax goes up 1%, given all the costs that people have to bear. Instead, he wants an increase in the sales tax, assuming, I guess, that poor people can't leave the city, which might be true. That's regressive and unfair, and I would speak out against it.
So do you take it as a foregone conclusion that he will be the mayor when you're the public advocate?
Not. I will be supporting ardently the Democratic nominee, whoever in this instance he is, always have. Mayor Bloomberg is a favorite for reasons I don't even have to belabor. I'm one of the 2 people on the planet with Freddie Ferrer, who knows what it's like to run against that mountain of money and his managerial skills. So he's favored, but President Hillary Clinton, in other words, there's no such thing as a lock, and he could be 1 or 2 events or a stumble or 2 away from absolutely losing, which has happened in the past.
You talked a little bit about the city being in trouble. Elaborate on that, because obviously the economic recession has affected many New Yorkers. Subprime crisis, pockets of it in the boroughs, but not as widespread in other parts of the city. Wall Street, the impact on the city overall, but particularly the unemployment that has been generated by it. Give us your overall assessment of where the city is right now and where you think it'll be over the next year.
The city's in almost unique trouble. The issue isn't whether we'll lose the nearly 300,000 jobs that were lost in the first few years of the 1990s. Regrettably, that's going to happen. Might we approach the more catastrophic 600,000 jobs lost in the 1970s? And we're on our way. This city will always have a Wall Street, but with electronic trading and us competing with London and Mumbai, we will never again see 5% of unemployment and 25 to 30% of revenues coming just from the fire sector, the finance, insurance, and real estate. Second point, I want to do everything I can with the pulpit of public advocates to increase real income of poor people and middle-class people. Uniquely, under Reagan and the Bushes and then Pataki, real income sank in this country in the last 30 years. Never, especially of working men. Women bumped up a little because they came into the workforce with pay equity. And so I've always been for living wage laws, for example, and I want to figure out how to encourage the new generation of jobs, technology, green jobs, continuing with health and professional service and financial services, which is a bedrock of our city. And so while other people may be focusing on big companies staying, I understand the anxieties of Citigroup and AIG. I want to figure out, I've been a small businessman now, Ken. I mean, you know me and a lot of your audience knows me. For 11 years, I was the consumer commissioner and then the public advocate, so I ran 2 citywide agencies. But for the last 2 years, I've been president of Air America Radio, now Air America Media. I took it out of Chapter 11, put it back on its feet, understood how if expenses keep exceeding revenues, you're in trouble. A press release doesn't get you by it. So I will be working especially hard on new jobs in new sectors and incubating green and technology jobs, like is happening in Greenpoint with small manufacturing, to make the city more welcoming to the next generation of workers.
You have a lot of expertise from your years as a consumer advocate, as the Consumer Affairs Commissioner, and some of your work as a public advocate on the regulation of markets and the integrity of financial systems. Do you have a take on what's happening nationally? And if you could translate that into what it means for New York, because to the extent that the public is hostile to Wall Street these days, that is New York's hometown industry. And as a political leader, how do you strike the right kind of balance on that?
Well, you do have to strike a balance. For years, we've heard this free market theology of laissez-faire, leave business alone, trust them. Laissez turned out not to be fair. It's collapsed with the banking scandals, the subprime scandals, and the evidence was there a decade ago on why we should continue to regulate and enforce transparency on banks and financial institutions. And then Republicans came along and allowed companies to be more secretive, attacked regulation, attacked the Securities and Exchange Commission. Mayor Bloomberg had a major piece, actually, in the Wall Street Journal about how we have to reduce what's called the Sarbanes-Oxley law out of Washington, which itself was a reaction to corporate corruption. And that's failed. Now we have to have much more, if you have ownership equity in Chrysler and General Motors and Citigroup and AIG, you may theoretically object to government involvement in regulation. The socialist was George W. Bush, who started us down this road. So I want smart regulation where they disclose what they're doing. And with the internet and social networking, we can now in real time see immediately what companies are doing. But Wall Street provides jobs and revenues, big time. And no candidate or official should be an enemy of that. But they have to work with them because they failed at what they were doing before because their heads were in the sand.
You have also been a critic of bureaucracy in many different forms, whether it's a big corporate bureaucracy or a government bureaucracy that's unresponsive. Now, with the government playing such a large role in the economy, isn't there the potential for things becoming even worse?
Well, the answer to your question, because I listened carefully, is there a potential for things? Yes, there's a potential.
So what do we do about that?
But what we know is that they're awful now, and we have the worst economic decline since the Great Depression. I think we'll avoid the Black Tuesday of 29, but even that's a question. So you have to put your fingers in the dike right now, and President Obama is doing that. With his proposals for a stimulus and for helping those who have been foreclosed on, or the 9 million who might be foreclosed on. We may not be as bad as Las Vegas, but that's faint praise. Yes, there's a risk, but as John Maynard Keynes and even Republicans now understand, if consumers aren't spending money and businesses are scared and not lending or spending money, if the government doesn't spend our money to get the economy going again, we will have a depression.
So is there a cheerleader role for the public advocate, or is it just a watchdog role?
It's both. When I was public advocate, we did the grunt work, the meat and potatoes, of answering 12,000 complaints a year, investigating city services like when Access-A-Ride was not picking up seniors who had to be on time to their medical appointment or their child's birthday. I forced the federal government to require Access-A-Ride to be on time 99% of the time. That's essential. But the pulpit function is to come up with new ideas that a mayor who may regard a public advocate as an institutional annoyance has to listen to or do. So when I thought the mayor, Giuliani, turned a blind eye to racial profiling, as you mentioned, I asked for data. He refused. I won a lawsuit, got the data, showed how infrequently abusive cops are punished, which hurts communities and honorable police. And we changed that system. Working with you and Randy Mastro and Rudy Giuliani, we exposed what we saw was a mob tax of $1.5 billion on mostly small businesses throughout the city because the karting industry was controlled by the mob. And they are working with Mayor Giuliani. We came up with a scheme that has by and large worked. So that's, I came up with an idea when I was running in 2001 for mayor, 311. I lose narrowly. To his credit, Mike Bloomberg acknowledges the idea, gives me credit, and does it. And now we have a 311 system, one portal for all complaints so you know where to be steered to for information or help. That's the kind of new ideas that I've tried to bring into my public life, and I would again, working either with a mayor, because he agrees, or sometimes blowing the whistle should he not.
We're going to continue our conversation with Mark Green on CityWide right after this.
This can't be happening.
This can't be happening.
Of course it's not happening. Armored car. Listen, having money isn't about luck. Make your own coffee, save $1,000 a year. Feed me. Feed the pig.
Welcome back to CityWide. We're talking politics with Mark Green, candidate for public advocate and former public advocate. Your successor, Betsy Gottbaum, has been in office now 7 years. The budget of the office has shrunk. The profile of the office has shrunk. So as somebody who's running for that position, how would you assess her tenure and how would you change the office?
Well, I think she's done well. She's a different person and style. Every president, every mayor has the same constitutional powers and they operate differently. I think she's done well in education issues, housing issues, poverty and food issues. The office has shrunk, and if it's commensurate with other agencies because of a budget crisis, that's understandable. But if it shrinks far more than other offices, then it raises the question of whether there's political retaliation. When I was public advocate, Ken, as you may remember, the problem was if you did the job, you could lose the job because Mayor Giuliani wanted to zero out the budget for the office, and then Speaker Peter Vallone wouldn't let him do it. And so I have a certain style, and I would treat the Office of Public Advocate, again, as a public interest law firm, where you investigate, you expose, but you propose new ideas, always, to get it by legislation or, if necessary, litigation. That means sometimes you step on toes. That's the job. An ombudsman is supposed to fight for average New Yorkers who can't afford a lawyer or a lobbyist. And sometimes you have to challenge the city council or the mayor or city hall to pull down this iron wall sometimes built between City Hall and the people.
So one of your competitors in the race, Norman Siegel, who ran well previously but never elected to any public office, he says he's the public interest lawyer. And in fact, on this show some time back, he said that one of the things that separated him from the other candidates was that he didn't want to be popular among the political class, that he didn't want to hang out with elected officials, he didn't want to go to their fundraisers,
right.
that he wanted to be sort of outside the system because he thought that was the only way that you could really be effective in the role. What do you think about that?
Well, I think Norman has been a very effective civil rights lawyer outside the system. He's absolutely qualified to be a public advocate. If he thinks that not being popular with the political class is an asset, I may have to include myself in that category. I don't know that I'm all that popular with the political class. But it's an anomalous role. You have to be in the system. You have to get elected. You have to work with public officials, like I work with you and Randy Mastro, to get something done, for example. But you're also a little removed because somebody has to be a watchdog and a counterweight, which is exactly what the charter requires over City Hall. So that leads to a possible unpopularity. I really want to try, though, should I win again, to get along with the Speaker, the Mayor, to the extent that if I have new ideas, I can't do them on my own. So if I want a green job center to encourage the kind of sheet metal work and engineering that provide jobs for middle-class people, I'm going to need them. If I have an idea for a Missouri accountability portal, so every contract, every employee, every vendor, every salary is online, so the public can judge us very quickly. If I want more commuter lines, express bus lanes, because it will really help move traffic, I need other people to get that done. So I respect what Norman says, and I understand the sentiment, because I have been most of my life an outside public interest lawyer, author, businessman, teacher at NYU. So I think I have a bundle of experiences, including running two agencies, as I said, for over a decade, that give me a unique perspective on being the next public advocate.
Another one of your opponents, Bill de Blasio, has positioned himself as I'd say almost in the forefront of, if it were an ideological movement, it would be about the redistribution of wealth. Forcing developers to provide subsidized housing, championing requirement that anybody receives any type of break from the government pay higher wages, and winning the endorsement of the Working Families Party, which was created exactly for that kind of ideology. So is that what the city needs right now?
Well, I'm not that interested in redistributing wealth. I'm interested in creating wealth, creating jobs that have been lost in new sectors, as I indicated. Now, to the extent that Republican administrations have had redistributed wealth from the bottom up, 90% of the productivity gains of the last decade, which are substantial because of the growth of the internet and computers, have gone to the top 1%, and labor is as responsible as management for that. So ideas about if people want to develop and get public funds, they sure have to make affordable housing. I agree with that. If contractors want to do business with the city and get millions or billions of dollars in contracts, they should provide a living, I mean, of course, a minimum wage, that's the federal law, a living wage because of our cost of living in New York. I agree with that. He did win the Working Families Party endorsement, and that's good for him. And I once had a labor leader say to me, we like you, but we're not going to support you. I said, why? He said, you're so, and I'm thinking to myself, what is the adjective going to come out of his mouth? You're so independent. And I thought, okay, I have a several decade history of being a progressive, pro-labor, pro-gay Democrat, and that's unarguable. But I make up my own mind, I write my own books, I come to my own conclusions, people may agree or not, and I'm not, I just can't salute if an interest group support me or not tells me to do something.
Do you think that the unions have too much power? They are outside of some of the restrictions of the campaign finance and laws. They seem to dominate the political debate, particularly in Albany. for a long time an alliance between some of the major unions and the Republicans in the state Senate. That seems to be crumbling, but basically a sense among some of the editorial boards that the unions have completely supplanted the political parties and are basically the sugar daddies to most elected officials.
I don't think labor has too much power. We're a union state and city. But for unions, the decline in real income for poor people and middle class working people would be grievous, much worse. The health and safety conditions of our workplaces would be much worse. So labor is an immensely positive force. Now, on any particular issue, they could do something that you don't agree with. And so I don't think they have too much power. Look, we've had a Republican governor for so long before Spitzer and Patterson, and we've had all these years of Republican mayors. So I don't think anybody would say that they control that process. I often haven't won big labor support, yet I was the Democratic nominee for mayor. Notwithstanding that, I love as much labor support, and I will be getting significant labor support because of my history, and my prospects, and my ideas.
Let me turn to one specific issue where a union is playing a major role in policy right now. That's the UFT mayoral control of the schools. It's going to sunset in the next few weeks unless the legislature renews it in some fashion. Tell us your views on that.
I've always advocated more mayoral control. Albany wouldn't give it to Giuliani because they didn't like him personally. Whoever was going to be the 108th mayor would get it. Michael Bloomberg won it. And instead of 32 different boards, sometimes acting parochially and not ethically, wasn't helping the kids. And so I support a mayor saying, blame me or credit me, a mayor having the power to pick a chancellor or the head of a board of education. It is true, based on all the hearings that I've been reading about and people who stop me on the street, parents are extremely frustrated. They don't know where to send their kids. They don't know what's going on. Who kind of knows better about what might be good for their or other children than parents? So they can't run it, but Albany and the mayor are going to have to come up with some compromise so that Mayor Bloomberg maintains authentic mayoral control, but there's some institutional board or say that he should or would listen to. And the only places we have this are with the two greatest functions of public government, policing and education. And in policing, we give young men and women lethal authority to use guns, so we have a CCRB to watch them. Police may not like that, but that's the balance we've struck. And in education, I'm for mayoral control, but we have to have a board that has a variety of talented people, picked maybe by borough presidents, a public advocate, a speaker, and the mayor, who have different ideas than just Mike Bloomberg.
Well, thank you for sharing some of your ideas today. My thanks to Mark Green, who is again seeking to be New York City Public Advocate. I'm Ken Fisher. Thanks for joining us on this edition of CityWide.